Okay, I'd like to welcome all to this evening's Lakeview Public Schools budget hearing. Today, 7 p.m., Tuesday, June 17, 2025, in the boardroom at the Weed Educational Campus. With that said, I'd like to turn it over to administration.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have our annual budget hearing in order to
The general fund is flexible. All the other funds, the debt funds, the food service fund, the capital project funds, those are restricted in their intended use. So here are the highlights, and I'll walk through them. And if you have questions along the way, just stop me, please. The per pupil foundation allowances are currently proposed as follows. So the governor, the governor basically is a 4.1%. Same thing with the Senate. We've just gotten news out of the House. The House is a larger foundation allowance increase, and there's some things that are going on with what they call a 22F categorical, where they're trying to roll up some of these categoricals into one, so some districts it might harm, some it might be advantageous for. But like the LEAs, they're proposing a $1,975 per student increase, so it could take away from maybe certain programs, and it's just basically unrestricted to the district to do, what they will with it. Anything you want to add on that, Carl?
Based on the fact that two other levers of government need to be accepting of the ideas that they're being proposed, the interpretation from, what I listened to for a week is this is going nowhere because it has to have approval from the other house, obviously the Senate, and the governor. It dramatically helps charter schools. It dramatically hurts several districts individually. And then, some districts benefit, some are net zero when it's all done. And the history of, at-risk special ed, mental health safety, literacy, there's a number of categoricals. I'm not saying that those are all good, because some of them are categoricals that are specific to vendors. The dyslexia law has a categorical specifically to two vendors. And I don't think any time that a vendor should be dictated to districts because they had the right lobbyist in Lansing to get their program approved by the legislature. And there were, there was like 72 vendor-specific categoricals in the past couple of years. That's not appropriate. So I can understand some of those going away and rolling them into some other space. But the big ones, it's not a good thing in the way it's being proposed. Now, will there something in between show up that at the end? There might, but I'm pretty optimistic that the bulk of what has been proposed by the House is probably not going to get anywhere in this process over the next 3 months as they negotiate with each other.
So, as we talked about, we're projecting an increase of about $400 per student. What this would mean in a dollar perspective would be $1.635 million. In the GSRP program, increasing about 85 students. Wages and benefits are going to increase with known contracts and then also contractual proposals that are out there with the teachers union. A capital project transfer is being proposed of $1.130 million. For potential future use for the district needs. That could be roofs, it could be, if the bond doesn't come to fruition, it could go towards this, it could go to anything capital-wise that we might have in the future. So we're basically putting the money over into our piggy bank so that we have sufficient funds to cover those projects. Some of the categoricals that are going to go away, there's a MIPSR's one-time funding of a 1.6, there's the 23G. So overall, in Section 97, which would be about another $220,000 approximately. So you can see the decrease in some of those categoricals, and then the ESSERS fund that had a little bit of trailing this year, that'll be gone. So there's a couple of knowns out there, these actual amounts spent in each account, which we're going to finalize. We have a final budget, but obviously we have to get audited. And then the actual fund balance at June 30th could possibly change, subject to the audit. My guess is it'll fluctuate a little bit somewhere. We'll have either revenue or expense, or maybe it nets out. But it's until we get audited, and then it's final. Final right now is an approximation that's going to be hopefully approved tonight. The actual enrollment for 25, state aid pupil increase. Again, we're waiting on the legislature to do their thing. Retirement rate increase, additional funding to offset. The state budget, again, we're waiting on October 1st, and then school year, so you see the timing difference between the two. School year ends in July, and we're waiting, till the end of June. So this I provided just so you can kind of see within all of the programs kind of where everything lies. And you can see again, we would plan to carry about $370,000 of an increase to the fund balance after transferring the 1.13. The increase in revenue is mostly, you have local property taxes, you had the 400 per pupil. Those are your big two drivers behind that, and you have wages, benefits are your big drivers behind the expense increase as well. State aid, again, waiting on the legislature. However, the budget, we're anticipating it to be positive, unlike what happened last year. The actual foundation allowance is still unknown. The state aid, we will receive for residents and school of choice students. And it's just to kind of give you an approximation of the totality and the scope of the revenue that comes from the state. It's about 85% of the overall revenue that we generate. It is still on, and it's going to, they're projecting it, we just got it back from the ISD, to increase $75 per kid. So it's been slowly going up, and there's a bigger jump this year in overall funding for the enhancement millage.
The benefit of that, increased home values, right? The property tax going up, collection going up because of the increased home values. You know, it's probably an unprecedented several years where home values have increased dramatically. And that one doesn't have a Headley restriction on it. Our local has the Headley restriction on it. That one is, here's a millage based on what the taxable value is in the county. And in some communities that increase is smaller, in other communities it's bigger, but it's divided out amongst the districts equally.
Good question. So kind of the revenue components, there's the $400 with the 90-10 blend. Overall expected revenue about $66,157,000. State categoricals, it mentions is about 1.6 have been reduced. The countywide enhancement millage, there's your increase, which is the $75 per student increase to get you to the $625, and the local property tax is estimated about $3.5 million based on the Form L20 that we submitted to you on the 3rd. So employee costs, just like the state revenue is 85%, the actual employee cost is about 81%. So again, a large chunk of us being a service organization, so to speak, is sitting with employees. There's an assumption of a 4% increase in health and medical benefit costs. And then the actual rate for the MIPSers is capped at 2.9%, the hard cap. I'm sorry, that's not MIPSers, it's the hard cap on benefit costs. We have a CPI adjustment for supplies, and we're still going to continue to be able to support the programs to address student learning. And then again, we're talking about the capital project transfer of $1.130 million, or $1.3 million. So the general fund, this budget continues summer programming, tutoring, continued quality programs for students throughout 2025-26. There's the capital projects fund transfer again. In the bottom line general fund, we project to approximately move or increase about $370,000 to the fund balance. For this budget purposes, to be conservative, even though from a pace perspective we're ahead, we assumed no per pupil increase, which we had talked about on the 3rd. And then there's several small increase of the current programming staffing levels, extracurriculars, summer programming, and other supports to assist with students. This is just a snapshot kind of how the FTEs have flowed all the way back from 2019, so you can kind of see the trend line. So we've been putting this on here for last year and a couple other prior years just to show you just the increase in students. This shows the fund balance over time, and you can see kind of the dramatic difference from 2015, 2016, and then it's been increasing year over year over year. And you can probably also see the big increase in with COVID. So talking about food service, the projected revenue is going to be right now remain relatively consistent. We were required to spend about $448,000 year over year. Otherwise, they come in and they tell you you have an excess amount in your fund balance, it being a not-for-profit, because technically the food service is a not-for-profit. So then you have to find things on a pre-approved list to go spend, or they slap your hand and they, write little comments about you. The competitive wages still attract staff, so we'll talk about it later during the board meeting, settling with the food service folks. Potential menu and student meal choices are impacted with new sodium requirements that'll come out next year. And then the universal free breakfast and lunch, if passed by the state, will be a potential positive or negative as we move forward. But we'll know that, I think, with the budget package that comes out from the legislature. School bond funds, we have the two funds that you guys are aware of. We're looking to finish some projects, which you can see there, playgrounds, elementaries, the playground in the early childhood center. If you go back behind Yale, you'll see that the parking lot's torn out. 2025, expected to spend the same remaining Series 1 and 2 proceeds. So when we talked about that 2022 having approximately 60,000, that should go away. So that's that last comment, that small amount. Capital Projects Fund, it was established in 1996, and this, again, is just used, we've been transferring money over from the general fund to grow it for the rainy days, all the stuff we had talked about. Here's just on the very bottom, some of the stuff that's out there, roofs, pools, auditoriums, other building or site needs, and anything that's kind of left over from the bond that we need to complete. And then again, if something happens from a contingency perspective, if we need to fund this, it's kind of our piggy bank for larger projects. Debt retirement fund. This essentially, we're collecting, money for long-term debt. This is kind of the spend of 4.9. It's going to show you the fund balance about 1.3, and it's got a note there about the debt fund being levied at 6.15, which is a reduction from 6.3 mils, which we showed on the L4 4029 back on the 3rd. So truth in taxation, we're required to talk about this. So the law requires units of government to roll back their millage rate proportionate to the increase in property values required if a truth in taxation hearing is not held. Lakeview voters supported a 20-year non-homestead millage override of 3 additional mills on November 7, 2024, that will expire in 2043. This means Lakeview will be able to levy the full 18 mills on local non-homestead property in 2025. Truth in taxation, some of the legal requirements, we were required to publish a notice to the public, which we did on May 28th in CNG Special Edition. The notice must state that the proposed millage rate will not be a topic of the budget hearing and the potential revenue loss without tonight's truth in taxation hearing. So here are the millage rates throughout the years, so you can kind of see the fluctuation. And then here's the millage rate, the state levy at 6, and the debt retirement at 6.15, equaling 12.15 mils. Here's your non-homestead mills, your state levy, debt retirement, and operating millage. So at our next meeting, which will be in, I think, about 15 minutes, we'll go over the budgets for the general fund, food service, all the funds that we had mentioned before for approval. And with that, questions? Yep.
My biggest concern was, and I know Carl kind of addressed it, but when we got this paper that says, among the other major categorical eliminations in the budget, 200 million for the universal school breakfast and lunch program, 598 million for the Michigan Public Schools employee retirement system, 87 million for literacy support. I mean, these things are so imperative for our budget. I mean, what if they decide to, when they're working this out, we get the universal breakfast and lunch program, but they keep the mixers with this $598 million, not putting it into the budget. How does that affect us?
Well, taking the food service one first, then we have to decide what we charge, what we offer, what that program looks like. We have to flip the program upside down and have the philosophical conversation and, adjust. The same thing with all the other programs. My guess is it's going to lie somewhere not that extreme. But if that happens, we have to adjust and be fluid. So that, to me, the budget right now, to be frank, is almost obsolete the day it gets adopted because of all of these unknowns. So it's to be able to be fluid, flexible, and stay on top of things, and then if in case of fire, you break glass, and then you start, looking at things, hopefully it's not that drastic. And I know there's pressure too. I heard on my way, I was driving around for an hour to take a break. The superintendent from Detroit Public Schools on WWJ talking just about them getting their act together and proposing something because schools can't create a budget on all these unknowns. So I think we have a fund balance there that gives us time, and that there's a reason it's there. There's a reason that the board designated 8 to 10% leeway for it, and then as soon as we get information, then we start making decisions, and whether they're tough or whether they're beneficial, that's, I think having to be fluid is kind of my only answer at this moment.
And we're lucky because we have a good, decent budget, because other districts do not.
I agree. It's just really scary when you have the Michigan House doing this, and then you have the federal government just ixnaying everything. And now we have districts would lose an amount of equal to 22% of the discretionary portion for their foundation allowance if they do any of the following: a curriculum that includes race and gender stereotyping, spend money on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I mean, this is just insane. It's insane. And I hope the people that see us know that we are thinking about these things and we are concerned for our students. And I mean, that's the reason I bring it up, is I just want them to know that we've read it all, we know what's going on, and we're just as scared as everyone else.
And we've tried to do what we could do over many years to prepare the district for the worst-case scenarios that come. Even in true, developing the strategic plan language, even to that level, we have avoided certain buzzwords that might create an opportunity for somebody in an Office of Civil Rights or somewhere else to try to say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to hold funding back for you on this. It doesn't mean we change what we're doing as programming. We're still going to teach kids the appropriate behavior and ways to interact and expectations, but we don't have to call it a phrase or a buzzword that might be somebody's, political soapbox, if you will. And that's, on the DEI comment you had about the language from the House proposal. Everything you were referencing is the House proposal.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think, even though I'm at the latter part of my career and I'll live through whatever happens, the reality of it is that you have the Senate and governor who aren't gonna fall down and say, oh, okay. Whether they can end up with a compromise that's reasonable, I think is more likely. It's hard to understand what the reasoning is behind this drastic, wild proposal from the House. Is it sending a statement and now we'll get to the real work? Maybe that's all it is. I don't know.
I think it sends a statement that they don't like public education, and they're just like, let's homeschool people, send them charters, we don't care.
Well, they like public education if you call it a charter.
It's ridiculous.
Because one of the benefactors of the House proposal, one of the big benefactors is the charter system, on how the formulas all work and the rules.
And when the day is over, that's the hand we're dealt with. We just have to react accordingly and protect ourselves the best we can. Any other questions? Can we get a copy of the slide deck printed
Sure.
Friday, please?
You want mine?
I don't-
You want everybody to have one?
No, in our board packets on Friday, please.
And we also, just for the next meeting, we didn't print, because it's pretty long, Mr. Collins, but we will email it to you, so you have it too. If you want a hard copy, you can let us know. Done with the hearing? Good?
Thank you for all your hard work, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yes.
Appreciate you guys
Once
too.
again, thank you.
Mr. President, seeing that this budget meeting has concluded, I motion to adjourn.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion to adjourn. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:26. We will reconvene at, will 7:30 work, or do people need to take a walk down the hall or something? Let's press on. We'll be back in 4 minutes.
Depends how long the line is at Cold Cow.
Oh, you're going there? The line is long.
Never mind.
I'm gonna put it up there. I didn't have it up. Yeah, I think.
Dan, did you hear back from
I
Bob?
got it right here.
He's a no.
He's a no?
He said yes next week, not this week.
Okay.
Apparently he's up north. Yep.
'Cause I was gonna suggest Doug, Jerry,
So there's only two right now.
Chris.
You were not responsible.
Okay.
So gotta find two.
All right. Next week will work.
I won't be here,
Okay, well.
so I don't care.
My kid.
Set it all up prior to.
Get in there. So I bought them all over the place. But she says. If you wanted more, just grab.
Okay, good, thank you.
I didn't buy.
Said I had to sit on it
Do you have your clicker? They have them in two hours.
Okay.
Oh, you, looks like you represent. I said, you got to go in the. Yeah, I do, she said no. So maybe they let them come and sit in their outside? I don't know. It's kinda odd to me. It's kinda.
It looks like it's 7:30. You ready? Like to ask all the able 2:30. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome all to this evening's regular board meeting of the Lakeview Public Schools Board of Education today, Tuesday, June 17, 2025, 7:30 PM at the boardroom at the Weed Educational Campus. I'd like to call the attention of the board, the minutes of the regular meeting of June 3, 2025.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the regular meeting minutes from the board meeting last month, or last meeting.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Mr. Ashe. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Madam Secretary, have we any public communication this evening?
Mr. President, there is no public communication this evening.
Okay. Board of Education Administration comments. Well, the end of another school year has come and passed, so I assume that it all went well with all the little ones in the elementaries and the middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they're off and running for another summer of fun and getting ready and getting energized for the return in the fall. You know, it was great seeing the seniors off at commencement, so, you know, it's to a board, that's, you know, the pinnacle of what we do, is getting kids off, ready for the next chapter of their lives. So, again, thank you to administration, staff, and the community for all the efforts that they've put forth this past year in making us a successful operation here. So, thanks again. Any other comments?
I have a couple. I received this information from the superintendent. I think it's really important that we address the Miss Bryan's class. I guess that's Miss Bryan's, Miss Bryan as a teacher, and Miss, I think it's Olsen? I'm not sure. Olsen, okay. Just this beautiful letter by a parent talking about their child with disability and how both of these teachers went out of their way. That it says, please accept this letter as both a note of thanks and testament of exceptional quality of educators under your supervision. I think that is just fantastic, and I just want the community to know. I know that we have a lot of amazing teachers and staff, but when a parent reaches out and writes such an amazing letter, I think those people should be recognized at a board meeting. I also read the letter on Mr. Rayner, which was amazing as well. It's so nice to get good news. I just want to put this out. Mr. Rayner not only provided display panels for the event St. Clair Cool City Committee hosted, it was a Wine on the Water event, but single-handedly curated the exhibit, ensuring all 15 pieces were handled with care and were professionally hung. He volunteered several hours throughout the evening, setting up and breaking down displays, artwork, and without any prompting, even served pizza and breakdown tables for the event. And then it just says, Mr. Rayner is an ambassador of for servant leadership, and Lakeview High School should be proud to call him their own. We are. And so I just want to give a little bit of applause to these three people that were specifically mentioned.
Any other comments? I know Mr. Bear and Mr. Alicia, you.
Yes, I was at the fifth grade graduation ceremony at Princeton. Fantastic job. My grandkids will be in middle school next year. I also want to do a shout out for the VFW. I was there last week. They had a flag retirement ceremony. A lot of our kids that were in the scouting program were there, and with all the flags that were worn and tattered, that were dropped off at the Bruce Post, they were retiring flags for almost 3 hours.
Cool.
So, and that's all I have.
All right, Mr. Asia?
Well, I just want to say, my son wanted to go play soccer at Ardmore today, so I was happy that I didn't have to go because they're working on the fields now. So I didn't have to go out there in 100-degree weather. It's a great thing, but I'm glad Bart Mellow's out there fixing the turf out there for the soccer kids. It's nice to see. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? None? Administration?
Mr. Asia, you have some years ahead of you, my friend. Take it from someone who knows. And you know, I would say that we probably see one of those emails a week in some fashion, maybe not quite as strong, but it is a testament to the quality of the individuals that we have surrounded ourselves with in those classroom level experiences, because that does it sells the deal, I guess, in many respects, and it solidifies people sticking with us right from the beginning to the end. And it starts at the Early Childhood Center, and many of the same type of comments come. I think we were watching some professionally made videos earlier at our retreat with the leadership, and you know, some of the cuts that are in there from the testimonials of parents that we filmed in the fall. And just re-listening to some of those, because I was with the camera crew when they were all taped, and you know, the 3 seconds that you see is a part of a 2-minute statement that the parent may have made. And, it reminds me about, what we're about, because they're talking about their kids' experience and their own experience with our staff. And it is great to reflect, and that's, to your point when you started with comments. We ended the school year on many positive notes, and another good year. And we're already starting with next year. We're digging into the data, looking at, scores that we can get information on, making changes, making suggested plans. We had our leadership team here all day today. We'll have them tomorrow. And it's exciting because good data is coming out in the preliminary information. And we have staff, and many staff and families will be away from us for a while, and I hope they all have a great, safe and happy summer. Don't forget, do a little bit of reading here and there. Stay on task, right? I think it was mentioned earlier, Eric referenced in the budget hearing, and Tracy mentioned earlier with our subcommittee, our food service and secretarial unions were very cooperative and collaborative in coming to some conclusions, and you have those as action items later tonight. Those teams and their leader, their professional AFSCME leader, were just, fun to work with and a pleasure to work with to get these things done quickly and easily. Literally several hours, not several meetings. So it was great to see that from the outside in, and then collaborate with them after they got to their outcomes. That I often say some things about our teachers or our principals and the staff in general, but I don't always say something about my closest staff in general who are at the table here and a couple in the audience. They have diligence, patience, expert work, and advice that help us lead the district as a board and as a superintendent, and it's much appreciated. Lastly, new enrollment, sometimes this is Tracy's, piece. New enrollment's in full swing. I think Eric mentioned it earlier, we're ahead of last year by considerable numbers and head count. That's just activity right now. It's not, are they showing up on day one and being here, right? But we will continue to encourage people to get here and let us know that you're here. Unfortunately, sometimes residents will sit on the sidelines until August, 30th and show up on the first day of school and say, okay, I'm here to drop off my kid for kindergarten. Who are you? Right? Oh, you live in, yeah, okay, great, thanks. Now go back to Wheat and fill out some paperwork and show us your residency and all of that. So, don't delay if you're out there watching. Make sure you get those things taken care of earlier than later. It helps us plan ahead and be more smooth and proactive on the first day. I'll leave it at that.
Yes, I would just add to that with enrollment. Sometimes folks think that our office is closed during the summer here at Central Office. Our enrollment office is open all summer long, and we are here to help people. So our website has lots of information about enrollment, but even more so, our staff that's here at Wheat is very knowledgeable and very helpful. So if people can call, and we'll help you through that process. Secondly, from HR standpoint, I'd like to mention that we do have a number of jobs that come available over the summer. Our way of hiring is posting. We do an online application process, and folks can check out our jobs that are available on our HR website and access the system that way. So I encourage people to take a look. We typically will have jobs in every single one of our categories over the course of the summer. And then lastly, I just want to report that the tech department and our building staff, media aides and staff lived through the process of collecting every single Chromebook at the end of the school year, and I appreciate the patience of students who had to turn them in and wait through a process, and parents who might have been in the parking lot waiting for their student. But I'm happy to report we had all 9th through 11th grade devices collected in less than an hour after the close of the school day. So we are busy now working on getting the new ones ready to go out to students. And our first group that will get them assigned are those students who are doing summer programs or summer school. Will start with their new Chromebook. So thank you for continuing to help us with that process of supporting those purchases.
Do those devices come pre-imaged, or do we image those internally here?
So we, as part of our bid package and our bond project, we did have the Chromebooks. We paid to have the Chromebooks imaged. We did not pay to have the staff laptops imaged. So our group internally will take care of that for staff devices.
Okay, cool. Any other comments from Ms. Van Perren or Mr. Paulson?
5,000 new Chromebooks. And what, about 250 new staff machines are going to arrive any day now?
We're about closer to 300 on staff. They'll be coming tomorrow.
Nice. Nothing else? Oh, and Mr. Lynn, thank you for your presentation before this meeting. There was a budget hearing at 7 o'clock, so thank you, Mr. Lynn, for the presentation on that. All right, we'll move on. Moving to item E, Superintendent Evaluation Training.
So we have the pleasure of providing a required training for the board related to superintendent evaluation. Every board in Michigan is required to be trained on the proper use of the superintendent evaluation document. Lakeview selected the superintendent evaluation document and process developed by Collins and Blaha Law Firm 2016. Does that sound right? The law was changed slightly over a year ago, modifying the ratings categories and percentage of student growth data to be used in the evaluations. Because of these changes, the law again required boards to be trained, and we had a new board member since we've been trained the last time, so we're doing double duty with that. Tonight, administration has got Gary Collins, and he's going to take over and provide you a presentation that, as I said earlier, we'll have emailed to you, and if you want a hard copy, we'll do that before you leave. Gary?
What I'm going to focus on is the components that you're going to be having discussions with your superintendent on. And as Carl mentioned, the statutory standards have changed. And what has changed is both the labeling of these standards and the removal of the fourth standard of highly effective. And the reason why the legislature removed highly effective is because if you were in a teacher bargaining unit and you were rated highly effective, in essence, you had super seniority. And so you would have the ability to be the last person laid off regardless of when you were hired. And there were a number of problems with that, as you can imagine. And so the legislature came back and said, we're going to take it down to 3 criteria. We're not going to prevent you from having criteria beyond that, but for the scoring purpose, there are only 3 criteria. So we still have exemplary, which would be the new highly effective. Why do we have that? Because you can't have a growth tool unless you have something beyond effective. In other words, you can't look at growth unless you're telling people, here is what we think is effective, and also here is what we think is above effective. And this is a growth tool. The tool is designed to encourage dialogue between the board and the superintendent, to look at areas and then to have a better understanding of the area. The first component is visionary leadership. And visionary leadership is extremely important in the public sector, because you can't really direct or train people unless you can articulate what is your vision. What are you looking for? Where are you trying to go? And be able to have that, understand it. It also has a quality control mechanism in there. And so if you look underneath the visionary leadership, you're going to talk about that they are going to use data to identify what they're looking at, to promote organizational learning, and they're going to have continuous and sustainable improvement. That's quality control, and that's quality control in your visionary leadership. And you're also going to monitor and evaluate the programs and revise the programs. This is a leadership, at the highest scale of the organization, of being able to say, where are we going, how are we going to get there, and how are we going to measure it? If I could look at page 28. 28, 2 pages, yes. So the second component is policy and governance. And policy and governance is, do we have policies in place? Do we update the policies? Do we understand the policies? And do we try to live within them and help other people understand them? Now, you'll notice on the policy and governance that part of that is also understanding the law and the collective bargaining agreements. A superintendent is not an encyclopedia. They are not expected to know every law. They are expected to know how to get access to people who do know the law and use them appropriately and to move forward. Some issues in some boards, not here, would look at policy and governance and would say, the issue is, does the superintendent agree with me or not? That's not the role of the superintendent. The superintendent is to advise you and give you options and explain those options. One of the hardest things to do to a client is to tell them when they're wrong. I'm sorry, you have a position that is not supported by fact and not supported by law. That's very difficult to do. So the superintendent is not designed to please people, but to advise them of their options, advise them where the law is, and lead in that direction. It also looks at the fairness of the policy and the guidelines. Are they applied in a fair fashion? Are they applied in a uniform fashion? In the public sector, we have to have a uniformity. This is not a private corporation where we can pick out who we want to benefit and who we want to have a detriment to. We have to look at continuity. We have to look at things that are equal between parties. A function of the superintendent is also helping the board developing policies during the year. And there is, let me give you an example of, because this is the most, I'm not going to say troubling, but this is the most interference that we have seen in running the public sector. Right now, there's 130 lawsuits against the federal government, okay? And one of the obligations we had initially from the Trump administration was to sign a document about 3 weeks ago. And on the deadline that we were supposed to sign the document, 3 separate injunctions came down. One from New Hampshire, one from Maryland, and one from DC. So we advised Carl of what all of this meant. But that is incredible when you think about it, that on the day that a federal regulation is to go into effect, that you have 3 separate courts ruling on why we're not going to take that into effect. The amount of stop and start we have this year under policy and governance has not happened before. There are 130 lawsuits. They obviously aren't all in education, but a number of them impact education. If you're looking at staffing in the federal government, you're looking at education. If you're looking at staffing in other areas, you're still looking at education because it's impacting the people that serve our school districts. It is difficult, and I was listening to Eric talk, it is difficult to make projections when the federal funds, when we really don't know what might happen on those. And so we have to live within our policies. The policies are changing sometimes on a daily basis. And we keep up with it, Carl keeps up with it, but it's really more fluid than it has ever been. And we don't see that changing. We don't see that changing for a period of time. Page 30, please.
When you say period of time, are you talking weeks, months, years?
Years. Yeah. Keep in mind, let me talk about 130 suits. The Supreme Court actually has a lot more to do than referee disputes between the governments, okay? I mean, they really have an important job. They are being inundated with disputes in the government. It is slowing down the judicial process. And so when I'm saying it's going to take years, yes, it will take years to litigate this. We will have some answers quicker than others. Some things will move to the Supreme Court quickly. But the court can only take on so much. And we have a lot of other areas in this country that need judicial guidance. It's just not the government. So will it go on for years? Yes. That's just the way it's looking right now.
And it just keeps piling on.
Unfortunately, it does. And a number of them have valid reasons. A number of them are rather frivolous, quite frankly. And so what we're seeing is changes in behavior on both the political spectrums, unfortunately. That what used to be a middle road in Michigan and in the federal government is no longer there. When Eric was talking about the budget, we used to have a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans on a budget, but it would be minor. It would be minor variations. It would not be whole different budgets. And that's what we're having now, is whole different budgets. And as Carl said, it's going to have to be resolved. And hopefully it's not going to be resolved like it was last year. Last year, with the coup that we had on our state foundations and retirement, there was not able to be one school district that could have projected that because it didn't occur until the last minute. So every budget in the state was wrong initially because there was no forewarning as to what's going to happen. That's the kind of issues we're going to have, and you folks do a wonderful job of staying ahead of it, but it consumes an inordinate amount of time. We are spending more time than I would like to chasing what are the latest federal guidelines and whether they're being enjoined. Instructional leadership. This instructional leadership is to education as an engineer is to the auto industry. It means you have an expert here and an expert that can give you advice. Our employees are incredibly educated. And in order to motivate them and to lead, you have to have a leader that understands the instructional process. There is always problems with change. People always resist change. You will always have people, always have people that believe they want education to occur as it did 20 years ago, because that's what they're most comfortable with. And it takes an instructional leader to talk about, why do we have to change? What are the changing demographics? What are the changing economics that has happened? The superintendent has to explain, and I'm going to say to the rest of us, and this includes me, I've worked in this industry for a long, long time. I am still not an educator. I still have to ask the educators, what does this mean? And they have to provide that information to us. They have to understand it. They have to understand when we need to change courses too. And I know Lakeview was cited a number of years ago. I'm trying to think, Carl, how many years ago were you guys cited as one of the most efficient school districts in the state?
Notably and exemplary.
Thank you.
Is that the report you're referencing?
Yes, that is it. That is
I
it.
want to say 17 or 18.
Yeah. That's an incredible honor, folks. Incredible. I mean, there were very, very few districts that were notable and exemplary, and your school district was one. When you looked at the data that Eric was looking at on the way of your gain in students, that's the market speaking. People are coming to your district because of instructional leadership. Things are happening in this district that aren't necessarily happening in other districts. And it's because you have leaders who understand instructional leadership, and it's because they have been able to share those ideas with the faculty, and the faculty implements them. Page 32, please. Communications and community relations. This has been a struggle It has been a struggle during COVID. It has been a struggle for a period of time. What has happened and what makes it difficult is the social media has killed the financial underpinnings of journalism. So we don't have as many local papers as we used to. We don't have as many strong local newspapers as we used to. There used to be a community paper in almost every community that would keep the citizens updated. Unfortunately, the financial base has been impacted by social media. And so our communities are getting more information off of social media than they ever should. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important that we keep communicating with our communities. And sometimes it's going to be redundant. Sometimes we're going to repeat the same message time and time again because you don't know when people are going to be listening. You don't know when people are going to be looking at what you say. And we have to basically fight all the rumors that you are seeing out there that
Every
are
day.
put on social media.
Every day.
Every day, every day.
People send something out there that's totally inaccurate, and that's what they see in front of them has got to be the truth. And that puts us and others at disadvantages. I mean, our kids as well, you know, the crap
We've-
kids send to one another, it's unbelievable.
Districts have had to change their communication strategies with the community because of social media. And so we are communicating in more ways. Your district does a great job of getting communication out to the public so the public understands. Once again, you would not see those increases in student enrollment if you weren't communicating. Does it need to be communicated? That's what you're looking for in a leader, is somebody that can communicate, somebody that can help people understand, somebody that can help people understand beyond the social media. And that's a huge burden, folks. It's very huge, but you've got a good message here, and we need to get out that message, and you do get out that message. Component 5, page 34. Organizational management. This is traditional, folks. This is what is traditional management. Let me give you some examples of districts that unfortunately haven't had good organizational management. You might want to look at Ann Arbor about a year ago, where they were running huge deficits. Why? A number of reasons. They added and added staff, and they lost students. Pretty simple, if you would. They closed down their school for a period of time and were surprised when the students didn't come the next year. Okay? That is organizational management. That is knowing where to do things, where to place your employees, how to run the school district. This is what keeps a public sector organization alive, is your organizational management. And you see organizational management displayed in numerous ways in your school district. I just sat in a personnel subcommittee, and one of the things we talked about is how are we going to be in compliance with the latest ruling in the courts and the latest ruling of the Office of Retirement Services. That's organizational management. That's knowing how do you protect the people in key positions. Also, how do you make sound financial decisions? How do you stay up on what is coming when the times are changing, and how do we react to it? Your district isn't, well, let me just say, you don't have the problems some other districts do. Let me put it that way. And let me put it in the positive. You allocate things appropriately. You make change when you have to. In the public sector, frequently the hardest thing to do is to say no. To say, no, we're not going to do this. Yes, you have a good need, but no, we're not going to work on that. That's hard to explain, but that's part of organizational management. It's knowing where you're going to put your resources and what you're going to put your resources into. Page 36, please.
And so much of that is driven by funding as well.
It's understanding the funding, it's understanding the impact of the funding, and how you're going to use that. It's management.
Yep.
I mean, it's old line management of resources, management of people, management of money. Professionalism and ethics. When I put this package together, this learning tool together, in 2016, I've been writing superintendent evaluations for a lot of years. And as an individual who had done it for a lot of time, it took me a long time to realize we have to evaluate people on professionalism and ethics. I thought that was just binary. Either you're ethical or you're not, you know. I thought it was in my opinion, for years it was just either they're honest or they're not, either they're ethical or they're not, either they're professional or not. What we find, though, is as our communities have changed, they are judging professionalism and ethics on much more than just honesty, much more than are you keeping your word, are you being fair to people. It really goes back to, are you attempting to follow the law? Are you attempting to follow your past policies? Are you having accountability? If you're going to have professionalism, you're going to have accountability. Professionalism is what safeguards our values of democracy. And school districts are one of the local sources of democracy. This is where people learn about democracy. This is where students learn about the process. So I think you understand, because you've used the tool before, that what you're going to do is you're going to go through these components and you're going to give them a rating. And you're going to rate each component. You're not going to rate each subcategory. You're going to rate the component. Okay? So that means for each of these areas, you're just going to give it one score. And the score has to be an even number. It has to be 1, 2, or 3. It cannot be 2.5, cannot be 1.5. It can only be those numbers. And then after we have those numbers, we multiply that by 0.8, because 80% of the evaluation is based on this tool. You then multiply the student assessment data that you have, and the student assessment data that you have is always going to come out effective, because it represents what the majority of the teachers are rated on student assessment, and it's effective. And so you're going to have a 20% rating that is going to be effective. And you're going to combine those scores, and there is a chart that gives a range on those scores. And that will tell you where your superintendent is rated. After you have done that, and I'm not sure if you're going to have it in closed session or what you're going to do, mostly you have it in closed session, then you come out and you affirmatively state what the evaluation is. You affirmatively say, we have found the superintendent effective. You can talk about exemplary, but that is not one of the standards that you can come up with. That is growth. That's a growth tool. Okay.
So our only bogeys out there are effective, developing, or needing support.
Exactly.
And 3 would be the effective then, correct? And
That's
the 2
correct.
and 1.
That's correct. Exemplary is a communication tool, so that you can have a dialogue as to what's the highest standard you want to see in a district. You may not get there, but what is the highest standard? Let me open it up for questions. You people have used this tool for a number of years, and so you're really fairly familiar with it. The big changes, and Carl mentioned them, is we went to 3 components rather, I'm going to say 3 evaluation areas rather than 4 statutorily, although we do have exemplary. And we also changed the percentage of student assessment that was used. These are the big changes that have occurred, and those are legislative. They've been revised into this document. Let me open it up for questions.
Wasn't student achievement 20% before?
Initially, it was 20, and then they moved it up to 40.
A couple of years, yeah.
And it was there for a number of years, and then now they've brought it back down to 20.
There's more debate over what percentage of that is. And the reality is because it's taken from where your teachers are performing, it doesn't really tell you a lot. Because you're looking at what is the midpoint of the faculty. The midpoint of the faculty, the midpoint of your teaching staff is always going to be effective. You may have some teachers that are not good teachers, but you're never going to have a majority of your teachers like that. That just won't occur.
That'd be a problem with the management of the teachers.
That would be, yes, that would be a number of issues.
Yes.
Let me open it up to any, yes, thank you.
So if we're only supposed to look at 3, why are there 4 on the rating tool?
Because for growth, in other words, if all you had was effective, how would you communicate what is higher than that? So you're trying to communicate in this what is the highest expectation you could have. The legislature says you're going to grade on effective developing and needing support. But as a dialogue between the board and the superintendent, you might want to have a conversation. Here's what we think is excellent. Here's some good things we think and would like to see. Here are some other things that are effective. It's a way of continuing the dialogue on the topic. But legislatively, we have to score it in the manner that we have.
So in this example here, exemplary goes away. It shouldn't
Absolutely.
be on here.
It's yeah, no. I mean, you're gonna come back with a rating of either effective developing and needing support.
Well, and one of the ways how we're approaching this with the teaching staff, you know, the teaching choices, if you will, of tools were state identified. Correct. And one of the problems the legislature ran into in MDE when they said, no, you can't use, in the Charlotte Danielson model, distinguished would be this exemplary or highly effective, and proficient and needs direction, you know, so they're down the road, right? And so the way they're approaching that in the bargaining to deal with this question, and without modifying the tool, because if you modify the tool, then it's not a legitimate tool anymore. So what happens is the top 2 categories get combined when it's all concluded at the end to determine what the rating is. So you could have all highly effectives or distinguished, but the end result reported to the state is effective, even though the person in their mind, and many, you know, several teachers, not many, but several in our district, because we use the tool with fidelity, you know, we didn't have every teacher that was highly effective. We had a few, and different people had categories that were highly effective.
The teaching tool is a national tool, so it doesn't matter what Michigan wants. Michigan can pass all kinds of laws.
And the people who created it aren't going to modify it because Michigan changed their rules.
Correct.
And as Mr. Collins said, we really wouldn't want it to come off because we would want that highly effective category for teachers because that is what we want people to strive for, and there is a higher level of instructional practice that happens at that level. There's higher with assessment, and so we would want to work with teachers. So it's the same piece. We're having that as part of the growth model, and they're getting scored that, and their observations are being reflective of that. But at the very end, we have to do the same thing for teachers as you'll have to do with him, as the 2 top categories end up being reported to the state as effective. But the teacher does get all of that information on how they can continue to grow.
So on page 12, the exemplary rating has a numerical score of 3, but theoretically, that should come off anyways, because it's not. part of it.
It's scored the same as effective.
All right.
So, I mean, and when you're looking at the tool, there's going to be some times when you're going to have exemplary, but it's still scored as effective. So you might find the superintendent exemplary on 3 of the components, but it's still scored as effective.
Fair enough. It's easier seeing it in print now, too.
I know, all of us are adapting to legislative mandates that don't necessarily comport with the best evaluation practices or what the nationwide practices are. But we will follow the law.
Well, I'll say this much, the tool that you provided us that we adopted nearly 10 years ago has been indeed highly effective for us,
Yes.
so to speak.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, boy.
Any other questions? Any questions from the administration?
Mr. Collins, we thank you for coming out and spending some time with us this evening. Good information.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, moving on with the agenda, the consent agenda. Item A, Michigan Association of School Boards membership.
Membership in the Michigan Association of School Boards is considered annually, and request for approval is being recommended to the board at this time. MASB provides various services to boards and districts in a variety of ways. The total membership fee for 25-26 school year is $8,090.34, including the legal trust fund annual renewal. 24-25 dues with the legal trust fund membership was $8,157.78.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the payment of the Michigan Association of School Board dues for the 2025-2026 school year in the amount of $8,090.34.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Taylor, support by Ms. Stanton. Discussion on the motion.
To consent, there's no discussion, right?
No, he's saying consent. Usually there's no.
Oh, you are correct, my bad. As this is a consent agenda item, there is no discussion on the motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. I stand corrected. Thank you, sir. Personnel, item A, changes in personnel revised at our places this evening.
Tonight, administration is bringing forward the following changes in personnel since the last presentation to the Board of Education on June 3rd. Resignations, Emily Finnan, Jefferson Middle School teacher, Nick Ganella, Lakeview Public Schools Executive Assistant, Human Resources, Rebecca McNally, Greenwood Elementary School Principal, Jasmine Montoya, Wheat Preschool Co-op, Special Education Part-Time Temporary Extended School Year Teachers, Abigail Adam and Teresa Szymanski. Special Education Summer Learning LEAP Program Tutors, Jillian Stelma, Deanna Damascus. Elementary Summer Learning Program Substitute Teachers, Jamie Hendricks, Joe Perino, Alicia Wagner, Emma Parks, Michelle Rossi, and Alicia Wenterline. Elementary School Summer Learning Program Special Education Paraprofessional, Krista Schneider. Schedule B Returning Coach or Sponsor as listed. And Schedule B New Coach Sponsor, D'Angelo DeMulis, Lakeview High School Track Assistant Coach.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the changes in personnel as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Item B, tentative 2025-2029 master agreement contract consideration food service.
This evening, administration is bringing forward a recommendation regarding the master agreement with Lakeview Food Service Union, ASME, Council 925, Local 1317.13. I am pleased to report that the Board of Education's negotiating team has reached a tentative agreement with the Food Service Union. The union membership voted unanimously to ratify this tentative agreement last week. The tentative agreement includes the following highlights. And administration appreciates the professionalism displayed by the food service team and the collaboration to bargain in an efficient and quick manner. The food service department has operated a self-sustaining program financially, and these additional costs can be handled within the proposed 25-26 food service fund budget. Administration recommends approval of this contract with language and changes as presented, and we're also happy to answer any questions that the board may have regarding the tentative agreement.
Mr. President, I recommend that the Lakeview Board of Education approve the negotiated tentative agreement with the changes as listed. for the membership represented by Lakeview Food Services Union, AFSCME, Council 925, Local 1317.13.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Martin, support by Mr. Bear. Discussion on the motion. Thank you to the food service representatives, administration for coming to terms and bringing it to us this evening. It's greatly appreciated, and we now have a way of moving forward for the next several years. So thank you for all your efforts. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item C, tentative agreement, contract consideration, secretaries.
This evening, administration is bringing forward a recommendation regarding an adjustment to the Secretary Union Master Agreement, specifically a letter of agreement with the Lakeview Secretarial Clerical ASME Council 925, Local 1317.13 Union. The negotiating teams met this spring to negotiate the addition of a degree salary lanes into the current salary schedule. This is the only topic under consideration at this time. I am pleased to report that both parties collaborated to develop this letter of agreement that successfully addresses this issue. The LOA recognizes both sides have the desire to attract the best possible candidates to our open positions and to retain the quality staff already employed with the district. Both sides agree continuing to establish competitive pay rates with additional compensation for degree attainment is beneficial to these goals. Administration appreciates the collaboration of the Secretary Union's team and recommends approval of this letter of agreement with the changes as presented. Union membership has already supported these proposed additions to the salary schedule.
Mr. President, I move that the Lakeview Board of Education approve the letter of agreement with the changes as listed for the Lakeview Secretarial Clerical AFSCME Council 925, Local 1317 Union.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Stanton. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Again, thank you for the efforts in bringing this to front of us.
Thank you.
Bond implementation, item A, bid pack number 11, Lakeview High School carpeting change order.
Tonight, administration is recommending change orders to Omega Flooring for carpeting installation in the Schaublin Auditorium at Lakeview High School for bid package number 11. During the planning phase for the renovation work at Schaublin, the decision was made not to replace the carpet in the auditorium and direct the lighting, sound, and electrical contractors to protect the flooring as work was being done. However, when construction began and savings were going to be realized due to lighting modifications, it was determined the carpeting could be replaced as it was extremely worn and there was moisture damage in several locations. A moisture mitigation system was also recommended to protect the carpeting in the orchestra pit. Additionally, at the same time the new aisle lighting was being installed, the existing carpeting needed to be cut back in order to set the aisle lights in place. Our team noted the carpeting was in poor condition in many areas, so we determined all needed to be replaced. Administration directed Barton Mallow Builders to get pricing from Omega Floors, the flooring contract for bid package number 11, to install new carpeting in the pit, aisles, and entries in the auditorium. Omega estimated removal of the carpeting and install of new carpet. Pricing was reviewed by administration, Barton Mallow, and partners in architecture. This task is very labor-intensive because of the number of steps at the rear of the space. All found the pricing to be appropriate for the scope of work, and administration directed Barton Mallow to have Omega proceed with the work prior to board approval in order to have the carpeting completed prior to May 30th in the event graduation had to be moved inside. Therefore, it is recommended that the board approve a change order and contract increase to Omega Flooring for auditorium carpet removal and replacement in the amount of $40,803, and representatives from Barton Mallow and partners in architecture are here to answer any questions the board may have.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the change order and contract increase to Omega Flooring for carpet removal and replacement in the amount of $40,803.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. I did notice at the event we had a couple weeks ago with the recognitions we had, that a lot of the lighting wasn't done yet on the aisles. Is that complete now?
No, they still have to do some of the cuts, especially in the upper level, some of the nosing lighting. We wanted to get the lower levels done, and that's the second phase that's going to be done. So once the aisle lighting is done, up the second level, the carpeting will be done there. So they're still working on that, and if you walked in there right now, it would not look like the same space that we were in a couple weeks ago.
All right, fair enough. Any other comments?
It says here that there were savings in the lighting modifications. Is it comparable to what we're spending?
It's a lot more than what we spent.
Nice.
Yeah, we were just kind of going through and value engineering, what can we do as far as lighting, things like that. And when we saw the savings from the lighting contractors, we were like, okay, now we can replace the carpeting, especially when we started to cut it. And as we were cutting it to set the aisle lightings, it was like rolled carpeting, and it would just tear along the whole thing. So it would have needed to be replaced anyways.
No, as you can tell, we like saving.
Well, and the functionality of the lighting system changes, it's still exceptionally better than whatever was before. So in the end, we're still going to get the functions that we were looking to get with, 1/3 less lamps, because the reality of one-to-one replacement wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And the vendor was, upfront
Yeah,
enough to actually point out, like, you know what, I think if you want to do this right, so he's actually very good.
Wouldn't some of those have been called out ahead of time, though? When you think about it?
Well, I think it's a very unique, specialized area, and Partners in Architecture was using a consulting company to help, pull the design together. And ultimately, the vendor was more knowledgeable almost than the design consultant. To look at what we had, start with what we had, which were, very old, and hodgepodged to what we wanted to do with the new space and how we wanted it to function. The vendor was actually very open about how to do it right. You're not going to be Broadway anyway, so might as well do it right for what your needs are, and then put some of that savings into other ways to improve the space. So.
Part of it was just the technology was better too, so one lamp did the job of what 3 or 4 lamps did before, so they were able to reduce that number.
Cool. Good stuff. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Bid pack number 11, Lakeview High School bid package number 11, pool site work change order.
Tonight, administration has recommended a change order to Simone Construction Services for removal of a hidden underground tank within the pool mechanical room at Lakeview High School. Yeah, surprisingly, we found something hidden at Lakeview, right? Unfortunately, at some point in the past, the tank was filled and poured over with concrete that created a solid rectangular block, which needed to be saw cut and jackhammered to be removed. This tank needs to be removed in order to meet the requirements for the plans approved by the state for pool renovation. Once this was discovered, administration directed Barton Mallow Builders to track the process of removal on a time and materials basis. Simone provided daily time tickets and was monitored and reviewed by Barton Mallow daily, with assistance and confirmation from Partners in Architecture. The team found the pricing to be appropriate for the scope of work, and administration directed Barton Mallow to continue with the work in order to keep the construction schedule and have the pool open in August. Therefore, it is recommended the board approve a change order and contract increase to Simone Construction Services in the amount of $95,511. And yes, Barton Mallow and Partners in Architecture are still here.
How large was this cavity?
About eight-
Bigger than that table.
Yeah, it probably,
Yeah, you got a picture.
and what would you,
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the change order and contract increase to Simone Construction Services in the amount of $94,511.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Taylor. Discussion on the motion.
I'm just thankful there was no fuel oil in that tank.
yes. And this was a very labor-intensive thing in a small space, about probably maybe the size of my office where they were working. So saw cutters had to come in, then leave, then the jackhammers came in, and then buckets of carrying this stuff out, so.
And then saw cutters again.
Yep.
Jackhammers
Yep.
again.
So layer upon layer, so it was not an easy thing, and
So in the future, can we possibly get kids that are on detention to do some of that?
That was a great idea 70 years ago. Doesn't go real well now.
Those kids were putting the concrete.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Item C, bid pack number 11, Lakeview High School pool painting change order.
Tonight, administration is recommending change orders to Stony Creek Services and Gemstone Painting for pool ceiling finishes at Lakeview High School for bid package number 11. During the startup phase of the work inside the pool at Lakeview High School, there were some areas with water infiltration from the roof, and the spray-on acoustical ceiling vendor, Stony Creek Services, indicated that this product could not be warranted if there were existing leaks to the roof that may impact the integrity of the ceiling finish. Administration had been monitoring the pool roof and performing regular maintenance, but the surface is near end of life. Roofing replacement was not planned for the pool project at this time, but administration knew this replacement was not far off in the future. Administration then made the decision to eliminate the spray-on acoustical ceiling and apply a traditional paint to the interior ceiling of the pool. Administration then directed Barton Mallow Builders to get pricing from Stony Creek Services to eliminate the acoustical product, a deduct to their contract, and to get pricing from Gemstone Painting, the painting contractor in bid package number 11, to paint the pool ceiling, which is an addition to their contract. Gemstone provided a price to scrape, prep, and paint the ceiling in the pool, and both prices were reviewed by administration, Barton Mallow, and Partners in Architecture, and all found the pricing to be appropriate for the scope of work. Therefore, it is recommended the board approve a deduct change order, your guys' favorite word, to Stony Creek Service in the amount of $171,478, and an add change order and contract increase to Gemstone Painting in the amount of $45,973. This results in a net savings in the scope of the pool renovation projects, and PIA and Barton Mallow are still here.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the deduct change order to Stony Creek Services in the amount of $171,478, and the change order and contract increase to Gemstone Painting replacement in the amount of $45,973.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Taylor. Discussion on the motion.
When we fix the roof, will we be able to put that acoustical coating on, or?
We probably won't. I mean, we could at some point, but
Okay.
right now, we have scaffolding from wall to wall on all four walls in there,
Okay.
in the pool. So it would be, it's a significant cost to have that scaffolding put in and have for several weeks.
So that's the next major renovation of the pool years
Yeah.
down the line?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
And the scaffolding's there for the ceiling deck, it's there for the HVAC ductwork, it's there for electrical runs that have to be made. So, we're doing all the other things, but it's based on the scaffolding being there. But to put scaffolding up to do the pool deck ceiling again somewhere, even if, 5 years
Yeah,
down
for
the
one
road,
contractor.
it's pretty costly to do that.
So it's just,
Cost
does
prohibitive.
it just mean it's louder?
That's all, yeah, it would create an insulation on the inside to help mitigate, because pools are hot and you get the heat fluctuations. But it was also to help mitigate some of the noise levels. But we had to make that decision because if you get some paint that gets some water and it bubbles, this stuff would peel off and literally fall off the ceiling. So we wouldn't want that, especially if it was in like the middle of the pool, so.
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to business. Item A, 2024-2025 final budget resolutions.
This evening, the administration recommends that the Board of Education consider the final general fund, capital fund, debt fund, food service fund, student activity fund, 2020 debt fund, 2022 bond fund, 2022 debt fund, budgets for 2024-25. In the general fund resolution, there's minimal change from the amended budget that was brought to the board in April of 2025 with minor line item adjustments between functions. Overall, the projected revenue to be 6.25 million, and then the 6.24 for the expense. Budget resolution also proposed a capital project funds transfer of 151.5 million to provide for funds for current and future initiatives, such as the completion of Lakeview Pool, auditorium work previously approved. We know that there will be future roof maintenance and replacement and technology and infrastructure needs. From the capital fund, as planned, is expected to have growth of fund balances for 24-25 because of this $1.5 million transfer. For the 24-25 fiscal year, we expect the capital funds to close with approximately $2.69 million. The debt service fund is consistent with the 2024-25 budget. Food service fund, the revenue is projected to be relatively consistent and generate approximately $2,085,670. Expenses will exceed revenue significantly because of the federal guidelines limit the amount that fund balances the program can have, and this is what they call the excess fund balance, which we talked about earlier. Past successes within the program generated significant growth to food service fund balance. Therefore, the district has continued to draw on this excess amount under an approved spend-down plan of approximately $478,000. The overall expenses will exceed the revenue this current year. There are general one-time purchases. An example approved by the board was a purchase of 2 new ovens for this high school kitchen. Administration expects the ending fund balance to be approximately $406,405. Student Activity Fund is consistent with the original 24-25 budget. The 2020 Debt Fund and the 2022 Bond Debt Fund are consistent with the original budgets as they are predictable revenues and expenses, yielding similar fund balance to the start of the year. The 2022 Bond Fund includes several projects that have been taking place this year, such as technology purchases, pool and auditorium work currently underway. As planned, these projects will nearly exhaust the funds, leaving an ending balance to close 24-25 of approximately $56,935. Therefore, the administration recommends the adoption of the 24-25 final budget, appropriate resolutions to include the general fund, capital fund, debt fund, food service fund, student activity fund, 2020 bond debt, 2022 bond, 2022 bond debt funds as presented.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the 2024-25 final budget appropriations resolution as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the next item, 2025-2026 original budget resolutions.
This evening, the administration recommends that the Board of Education consider the 25-26 original budget appropriations resolutions for the general fund, capital projects fund, debt fund, food service fund, student school activity fund, 2020 school bond debt fund, 2022 bond fund, and 2022 bond debt fund budgets for 25-26. The administration projects the general fund revenue of approximately $66.1 million and expenses of approximately $65.7 million, which continues to include student support for learning loss, social and emotional needs, safety and security, and focuses on providing the highest quality programs and staff. There are many unknowns as we begin 25-26 fiscal year, including the actual cost to close the 24-25 fiscal year. However, the outlook looks favorable from an upcoming year. As of this writing, the governor of the Michigan House and Senate have proposed a student foundation per pupil increase. The state's fiscal year ends September 30th, begins October 1st. Although the state's general purpose fund and state's general aid fund have significant resources, state leaders have not passed a final budget at this time. The district is required to have an original budget in place by July 1st each year. Lakeview, like all schools in the state, must base our budget work on state revenue assumptions, particularly as it relates to the student foundation allowance. Revenue is also heavily dependent on the student head count each year, which is how states' revenues are delivered to local schools. The district has made the budget assumptions on a consistent head count for the 25-26 school year. On the general fund side, revenue, on a general fund revenue side, the district has assumed a 90-10 blend for student membership. The district anticipates approximately a 4.1% increase in the state aid funding based on both the executive and Senate budget proposals. Funding for at-risk English language learners, special education, career and technical education programs are projected to be increased by approximately 4%. Local property tax revenue is estimated at $3.5 million based on the proposed Form L4029, inclusive of the revenues for tuition, from tuition, early childhood programs, and athletics. Local grants specifically to 23G, ESSER 3, and Section 97 have been removed from the 25-26 projections. Although partially offset by increases in other revenue programs, this net reduction is approximately $222,000. This budget has an increase in retirement costs with an approximate decrease in revenue of one-time MIPSR reduction of $1.6 million, which is a categorical, as well as additional revenue from an approximately $70 for students for the Macomb enhancement millage. On the expenditure side, there's an assumed 3% wage increase pending teacher negotiations related to the master agreement. A 4% increase in health and medical benefit costs is assumed, along with the healthcare state set capped rate increase of 2.9% for 25-26. Loan payments have been increased by $150,000 as an estimate for potential administrative relocation. The supply costs have increased about 3% for CPI adjustments. Capital Projects Funds is proposed to have an incoming transfer due to the proposed general fund transfer of $1.13 million. This fiscal year's activity includes projects such as the completion of the Lakeview High School's pool, auditorium, and other construction work that may not have been covered through the minimal remaining bond funds. Conservatively, the Capital Projects Fund could close the year with approximately $3.8 million in expenditures and ending fund balance of approximately $136,000. Food service funds, revenue is projected to remain consistent with 24-25 at approximately $2.4 million, which increases slightly lower, with expenses slightly lower at $2.1 million. The federal budget guidelines limit the amount of fund balance that the program can have, called excess fund balance. The district has developed a spend-down plan to address this excess. We anticipate the program will end the year with an increased fund balance, leaving approximately $731,000 available going forward. The Student School Activity Fund accounts are primarily fundraised monies, and the various groups may or may not spend their cash. The budget is expected to close the 25-26 school year with approximately $505,000 in the fund balance, which is consistent with 2024-25. The debt funds have a predictable revenue and expenses, and these budgets are consistent with the prior year. These funds are utilized to collect local tax revenue and pay bond indebtedness previously approved by the voters. The 2022 bond fund will start with a small fund balance that will be exhausted early in the fiscal year. Administration is appreciative of the voters who supported the ballot proposal in the November 2019, and those funds have been transformed all the buildings in the district. Therefore, the administration recommends the adoption of the 25-26 original appropriation resolutions as presented.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve the 2025-26 original budget appropriations resolution as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion. A point of clarification, you had mentioned the Macomb enhancement millage per student at $70. It was noted as 75 earlier.
75. It should
It
be
is 75, okay.
Yep. Sorry about
Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, seeing no more business before this board, I motion to adjourn.
Support.
And we have a motion by Mr. Bear, support by Ms. Martin. Discussion on the motion to adjourn. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned at 8:40.
Yeah, and they've got some landscaping in that,
that. Some access tomorrow.
because when the line's too long, I hop right in there and run up to the window because there's no